Excellent!
What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. NVIDIA launched a new GPU today. It is the GTX 950. Now this is more of a budget card for 1080 gaming as the pricing starts at $160 US. Today we're going to take a look at a couple variants, the AMP edition here from ZOTAC, as well as the ASUS STRIX 950. Now like many of the cards that are out there right now from board partners like EVGA, MSI, and Gigabyte, these cards both come factory overclocked, and they also come with their own unique cooling solutions. But the GPU at the heart of each card remains exactly the same. So I'm going to start off with a rundown of the general GPU specs for the 950, then I will take a closer look at each of these two cards, and then how about maybe we run some benchmark comparisons to give you guys an idea of the performance, and finally, we'll take a look at some pretty cool new features that NVIDIA has integrated into their GeForce Experience utility, which allows you to stream your game to a friend's PC just via a Chrome browser plugin, and even lets you join in with them for some co-op gameplay. So shall we begin? Okay, so the GTX 950 is a GM206 based part. That's the smaller Maxwell chip, which is the same one the GTX 960 was based on. But with the 950, you get a pared down version with 768 CUDA cores versus the 1024 that you get with the 960. Texture units are also down to 48 versus 64. Base clock is a little bit lower, but the boost clock is a little bit higher, which is weird, I guess. But the memory is a little bit slower too, at 6.6 gigahertz as opposed to 7 gigahertz. You get 2 gigabytes of GDDR5 on the 950 on a 128-bit bus, and although the TDP is down to 90 watts, it still pulls a bit more power than the 75 watts that's available via a PCI Express slot, so you're going to need a 6-pin PEG connector from your power supply to power the card. Now for a look at each card, I'm going to start with the ZOTAC AMP exclamation point edition here. This is ZOTAC's top-end 950, and you'll notice it's kind of strikingly similar to their GTX 960 AMP, which I reviewed back in January. Actually, because the 950 and the 960 both use a GM206 GPU, you're going to find that many vendors have actually reused their designs from the 960, which is good if you like coolers that are overbuilt, but bad if you were hoping for a teeny tiny version of the 950, like what you might have gotten with a 750 Ti, for example. Anyway though, this card is about 205 millimeters or 8.07 inches long, and ZOTAC's got you covered with a couple 90mm fans on top, pretty decently sized aluminum fin array with a couple copper heat pipes underneath, and the metal and plastic shroud has a gunmetal gray finish with some nice faux carbon fiber accents. ZOTAC is keeping the pressure on other vendors by including their very nice wraparound metal backplates, even on this more entry-level GPU, so good on you, ZOTAC. And for vital connection points, you have the aforementioned 6-pin PEG power plug, the standard PCI Express Gen 3 connector, which remains Gen 2 compatible if you're upgrading from an older system, a single SLI finger for two-way SLI support, even though I don't really recommend that configuration on lower-end cards, and video outs, including a DisplayPort 1.2, an HDMI 2.0, and a couple dual-link DVIs. Note that the yellow one does have analog connections as well, so you can use a DVI to VGA adapter on that if you're using an older VGA-only monitor. I used this card for the benchmarks that you're going to see in just a minute as I got my hands on it first, and it had the higher boost clock out of these two with a base frequency of 1203, a boost of 1405, and a max operating clock of 1467.7 out of the box. The ASUS STRIX GTX 950 variant here also looks quite nice. This is also actually the first ASUS STRIX owl looking card that I've had here in the studio, so I hope to see some more of them. ASUS went with a 2-fan design here, much like the ZOTAC. These are 75mm fans with the distinctive black and red Strix shroud all around them. This is a plastic shroud, which is to be expected with a lower end GPU, and the whole card is just under 225mm or 8.85 inches long. There's an aluminum fin array down there and a couple big fat 8mm nickel plated heat pipes to aid with dissipation of heat from the GPU. No backplate on this 950 from ASUS, but there is a metal support bracket to minimize PCB flex, and that all black PCB doesn't look too bad if you ask me. Key connections are identical to the ZOTAC version with a 6-pin PEG power plug, PCI Express Gen 3 connector, single SLI finger, and DisplayPort 1.2, HDMI 2.0, and a couple dual-link DVIs for video outs. In practice, the ASUS GPU temperature topped out at 70 degrees Celsius, although the out-of-the-box overclock was not quite as aggressive as the ZOTAC, with a base frequency on the ASUS of 1165, boost of 1355, and a max operating clock of 1430.2 MHz. The ZOTAC ran a little bit hotter, topping out at 73 degrees, but it was running at a higher clock speed. Both GPUs won't run their fans at all, by the way, until the temperature increases, I think, to 60 degrees Celsius, so at idle, you get zero noise. The coolers on these cards actually seem pretty evenly matched from what I can tell, and I'm pretty confident that with some really basic overclocking, you can get equivalent performance out of either of these by pushing the GPUs up to the, say, 1475 to 1525 max frequency range. Now I'm going to move over to some benchmarks. So here's my testbed configuration, and please bear in mind that I'm not tuning these benchmarks down for these entry-level cards. We're still at very high or ultra settings where possible, and these GPUs are really going to be more comfortable at 1080 with high or medium settings. I'm running an Intel 5930K overclocked to 4.4 GHz, 16 gigs of G.Skill Ripjaws 4 DDR4 memory at 2666, an EVGA X99 classified motherboard, a Kingston HyperX Savage 250 gig SSD, and a Rosewill Tachyon 1000 watt power supply, all powered by Windows 8.1 64-bit. Sorry for the lack of AMD card representation here, but I don't have an R7 370 on hand, which is the nearest competitor to these two. I did throw in the more expensive GTX 960 and GTX 970, both from EVGA though, in order to give you something to compare to. And that said, here are the benchmarks. Okay, so the benchmarks tell us that this card will give you about 80 to 90% of the performance of a GTX 960. Also that you should stick to 1080 gaming because 2 gigs of GDDR5 is pretty limited for anything higher, and that you'll probably be more comfortable tuning the visual settings down a notch or two if you want smooth 60 plus frames per second gameplay. But wait! That's not all, my friends, as NVIDIA was also very excited to share some new software-based features that they've integrated into the beta version of their new GeForce Experience utility. The first one provides latency reduction for MOBA players, and this will work with the GTX 950 starting in September, but should be also coming to other GeForce GPUs in the future too. The supported MOBA games out of the gate are Dota 2, League of Legends, and Heroes of the Storm, and to reduce input lag time, NVIDIA has basically removed one of the steps from the DirectX graphics processing pipeline. You can only do this with less graphically intensive games like MOBAs, but when combined with the GTX 950's reduced GPU processing time, the result is a significant reduction in the time between you doing something like clicking your mouse and the action actually taking place on screen. They demoed this with a Frankenstein mouse Arduino board to provide a visual cue for the click, and compared it with some high-speed footage of what happens on screen. The result is that the action takes place in about 45 milliseconds versus 80 milliseconds without this technology, and that's a pretty significant impact for a twitchy game genre like MOBAs. Finally, there's this new in-game sharing overlay that GeForce Experience has integrated into the most recent beta, which gives you access to the instant replay feature that automatically DVRs up to the past 20 minutes of gameplay. It also has the record feature, which can capture up to 4K resolution clips at 60 frames per second, and also lets you now trim down the footage and automatically upload it straight to YouTube. There's the broadcast feature that can stream straight to Twitch, which I'm sure the XSplit and OBS software devs are super stoked about. And finally, there's this stream button that ties in with game stream. So here's how that works. So first you hit the stream button, then you get an email or a URL that you can email or send the URL to a friend. They need to be using Chrome, and they'll also have to install a browser extension for Chrome. But after they do that, GeForce Experiences establishes a peer-to-peer connection and lets you on your gaming computer stream your game through to your friend's PC via Chrome at 720 resolution so they can watch what you're doing. Now that's pretty cool by itself because it eliminates server lag that you might get via a streaming service, but NVIDIA also added the ability to control the game via the remote system. So you can co-op with a friend in co-op capable games like Trine 3, even if they're across the country. You can give control to your friend to help you out to get past maybe a tough spot in the game or something like that. Or if you're a crazy streamer like my friend Steve, who does his Master and Minute show on Sundays at 7 p.m. Pacific time at twitch.tv/burialgrounds, I imagine this could be put to good use for forwarding game streams to other systems, then compiling them into a master stream or that kind of thing. I'm sure there's lots you can do with it, and I'm excited to see what people actually get done. The remote system doesn't even need to have an NVIDIA GPU. It just needs Chrome on the system you're streaming to, an i3-2100 or better CPU, and a decent router and internet connection with recommended 7 megabits per second or better speed. Okay, so that's the NVIDIA GTX 950, and let's conclude with some conclusions. So first, for those who really wanted me to compare this to the lower-end AMD cards that I don't have, my apologies, as I do not have those cards. But I will put a link in the description to a wonderful Guru 3D article, which gives a wide array of GPU comparisons. From that, I can tell you that the $150 R7 370 pretty much gets beat by the 950 in every test that they ran, even though the 370 has 4 gigs of VRAM. Another competitor for the 950 is actually the GTX 960, because when the 950 starts at $160, and the Strix one costs $170, and the ZOTAC one costs $180, at least as of today's pricing on Newegg, wouldn't you maybe consider just getting one of the GTX 960s? It's on sale for like $185 or $190 bucks, because they do go on sale for that much. That is something to consider. Now, the pros list for this GPU is pretty good though. As a low power card, I only pulled about 285 watts max from the test bed, and that's with the 5930K. You could almost certainly get by with a 350 watt or maybe a 400 watt power supply, and the HTPC potential is very nice here since you've got quiet cards all around, HDMI 2.0 support for 4K 60Hz, plus hardware-based HEVC or H.265 decoding. If you're into MOBA games or indie titles or like World of Warcraft and not as graphically intensive games, and you need an upgrade at this price range, it's the perfect option in my opinion. Also, you do get DirectX 12 support for a little bit of future-proofing. Now, the cons list must mention that you do need a 6-pin PEG connector for this card, so that makes it less of a drop-in upgrade for folks with older systems with weaker power supplies. That is one of the things that made the 750 Ti so successful. Also, you only get 2 gigs of GDDR5 memory, which was a limiting factor even for some of the 1080 tests that I ran. But if you are considering going for a 1440 or a 4K panel anytime soon, I would want a beefier GPU than this. If you're thinking of getting one of these though and upgrading to SLI in the future too, I wouldn't recommend it, as you'll still be stuck with 2 gigs of GDDR5 effectively. I know DirectX 12 might change that, but until you can actually buy a DirectX 12 game, I'm just not going to count that as a feature. So there's my review of the GTX 950, and I hope you guys have learned a little bit from it. I'm actually pretty excited about some of the new GeForce Experience features, and I think for budget builders, the 950 brings some significant offerings to the table. Let me know what you guys think of this card down in the comments section though. Is anyone actually planning on picking one up? Also, let me know which version you're going to get and what kind of system you're going to put it in, whether it's a lower end gaming system or an HTPC or that sort of thing. Hit the like button too while you're at it, but only if you enjoyed this video presentation. You can also check the description for links to my store for shirts and mugs and glasses, and my Amazon affiliate code that you can bookmark for future shopping sprees. That is all for this video, ladies and gentlemen, and as always, thank you for watching.